So before we go into the topic, before we do anything, I want to just address safety first. We're going to do meditations and sort of guided explorations. And it's important to note that you can explore as much as feels safe for you. Even if I invite you during the meditation to explore, it is up to you if anything causes distress or discomfort to refrain from that, stay with your body. Of course, if I say or do something that makes you feel as unsafe or offended, I'm really open for you to communicate it with me, either in the group or afterwards. And as you may have noticed, the meeting is being recorded and will be shared with the registrants. But if you at some point share something that you don't want to be recorded and shared, just want to let you know that I will be able to edit it out. So you can just tell me if you don't want to show up in the recording. Okay, I think that's about it. And let's start with a body scan just to land here. I invite you to take your seat. Make sure you're comfortable and just find some stillness. Notice the contact points with the chair or with the ground. Notice your breath. And notice the landscape of the senses. Temperature, smell, taste, even your visual field as you have your eyes closed. The sounds around the room and the sound of my voice. The thoughts that come up and go. And see if you can be with it without trying to change it. And I'm going to name different body parts. And those are just an invitation to sense them, to breathe with them. Feeling your forehead in between the eyebrows, the cheeks and the jaw. And sensing your whole face expanding over the head at the top of the head, towards the back of the head and the sides. And you can match your breath with the sensing, breathing in and out, to your whole face and your whole head now. Moving down towards the back of the neck, all around the sides of the neck, and pay some special attention to the throat, how the air is coming in and out, passing through the throat. Now breathing into the shoulders And breathing out and down all the way to your fingertips. Imagine a warm oil flowing down your arms to your wrist, hands, and fingers. So do a couple of breaths at your own pace. And we move on to the chest and how it is affected by the breath. Going outwards towards the armpits, all the way to the upper back and cervical spine, flowing down to the thoracic spine, the midsection of the back and the ribs. And notice how they're all affected by the breath. Now sensing your belly, wherever you find a sort of contraction or numbness, lack of feeling, you welcome that too. Going to the lower abdomen, circling around the lower back. Maybe you find the breath deepening a little bit, but not with force. And now we're zooming out, feeling the whole torso, front, back, and sides. This might be hard. Sometimes you find yourself jumping from body part to body part with your attention. And see if you can welcome that and zoom out even more. Now we're sensing the hips and glutes. And see if you can melt into the chair a little bit more. Going down towards the thighs, just like soft butter. Warm, flowing down to your knees, the calves and the shins, all the way to the ankles and the feet. And just a small invitation for curiosity. How would you count your toes with your senses if you didn't know how many you have? And don't move your toes. So see if you can separate them just with your awareness. More like with a playful attitude, nothing to analyze. And now zooming out again, more and more, from detail to landscape, feeling the whole body, and zooming out even more, including the thoughts, the senses, And maybe we can all set an intention for the next 60 minutes or so. My intention is to be open and share this space with you as honestly as I can. And see what is your intention, what is it that you want to bring to this space, even in your silence, even you are part of this. And when it feels complete, you can slowly restore back some movement to your fingers and toes, and we can transition back to the group space. Good. So let me first tell you a few words about how I got here and sort of give you my background. I started from medical school, then graduating from there, I served as a medical doctor to a small island. You can see this island in the pictures. At the same time, I started to realize the importance of the body, of movement, of our somatic awareness and expression, and how it is maybe the missing piece from Western medicine. And I went on to study psychiatry in public mental health care, still with the need to explore more about the body. And I got to do my training in IFS and other trainings that I'm not mentioning here. So this is a little bit of my background in terms of education. And at the same time, as I said, I was getting more and more into the movement practice, not just learning a certain skill or a certain type of movements, but more like the general scope of movement, and I still do. I went to meet a hunter-gatherer tribe, studying how they move, how they interact with each other, the psychological aspects. And all this together with my education started to create something new that came out. And this is how I created my integrated practice, where I take all that I learned and sort of um, this comprises my method, let's say. Yeah. And let's get to the topic of today, which is internal family systems, the model. And so what is this, right? Maybe many of you have never heard of this, and that's great because you can be open. You don't have a predisposition. So it's a way of looking at our inner landscape as a system of many different parts. So this is why we say internal family. Don't confuse it like with a family of siblings and parents. It's more like an internal community of different parts. Each part has its own personality, needs and beliefs, memories. Some of them, they carry their own weights and they have a specific job. And our parts interact with each other. And what I mean by parts, to give you an example, my workaholic part, my inner critic, the one who procrastinates, and those interact with each other, right? The inner critic criticizing the procrastinator, So this is very important that it's part of a system, and we have interactions, we have conflicts, we have alliances. Okay? Um, yeah. And for some of you, it might be intuitive. It kind of makes sense. Yeah, I have these parts of me. And for others, it might be a little bit weird. Um, but maybe you can notice some personas you get, maybe when you're at work, sort of a certain part that comes up when you're at work that behaves a certain way, that has a certain tone of voice or anything. And how is that different from when you're at home or from when you're with your friends? Maybe other parts show up there. Okay, so this is we find from everyday experience. And also it makes sense from neuroscience. We can see it as neurons wired together responding to certain stimuli. And even from evolution, it kind of makes sense to have different parts that have different skill sets and collaborate to respond to certain complex situations. Okay, yeah, as I said, it might sound a bit weird to some of you, but we can stay open. And as you may find, this idea of parts relates very much to um, how we can bring change inside. Just an important note for whatever we're going to do here and whatever we're going to learn, the fact that it can create some rapid shifts in how you feel doesn't mean that it's like a brain hack or a shortcut or should be seen as you know, it needs to be respected. All inner work needs to be respected because it's a very tender area when we go to our inner landscape. And I want to quote something from the founder of IFS, who says that IFS is a loving way of relating internally and externally. So it is a life practice. It's something you can do on a daily basis, on a moment-to-moment basis, with yourself, with others. So this, a life practice, right? Not just a tool in the toolbox. Of course, it depends on how you will do it. Okay, so I have a quick task for you all. I want you to bring in mind a habit or a behavior that you may like to change, that maybe you don't like that you do it. And you can even close your eyes and say to yourself, I do this. For example, I scroll when I am supposed to be sleeping. And just notice how that feels in your body. And now, simply rephrase to a part of me does this. It's a part of me. And notice if there are any shifts when you name that it's just a part of you that does this. Just notice. Okay. And you can take note of whatever you like, and we have time for sharing towards the end. I would love to hear. Um, okay, so I will now give you an example of how parts take on the protective roles. So this in other modalities, you may hear it as defense mechanism. In IFS, we call them protectors or protective parts. So after an experience of pain, usually, in childhood, arises a deep need to prevent this pain from flooding the inner system. And then the parts have to take on protective roles to prevent or to soothe the recurring pain of the traumatic event. And I will give you an example to make it a bit more clear. So this is little Chris, and he's 4 years old here, and he loves to play with his Legos, makes whole villages, and one day he was very happy with the village he made. So he brought the whole village and laid it on the ground of his parents' room, because he wanted to show his village to his dad. And he wanted to see the dad's reaction. So he hid under the bed and just waited for dad to come back from the house. Dad steps in, being really tired from work, and just walks in the room, steps on the Legos, and immediately he got rageful and starts yelling while trying to find Chris. And then he finds Chris. The dad thought that Chris was hiding just out of fear. So he starts being offensive with him, like, oh, you need to man up. Why are you hiding? And this is an experience of pain for a 4-year-old. And some things might seem trivial to us, maybe because we have those protective layers on for so long. But for young children, it's actually an experience of deep pain sometimes, a feeling of worthlessness, helplessness, feeling small. Okay, so this would be the experience that would lead to the formation of protective parts. This is just an example, okay? There are many examples, of course. And would anyone like to share what kind of beliefs may arise in Chris's system following this experience? What he may start to believe the world is like, or he is like? Playfulness got me into trouble, so I better not be so carefree when I'm playing. Or I need to prove that I'm worthy. I need to show that I can be more like a real man. These are all subconscious processes, so it just shows up in his body as he develops. Okay. And another question, how would those beliefs turn out to shape Chris in a later stage of his development, in his puberty or even adulthood, if you guys have any idea? There's no right answer, by the way, you can just say what you think. And I will tell you the categories of parts very broadly that we use in IFS. So when a part is trying to prevent the system from re-experiencing the pain, we call them managers. Kind of like trying to manage everything so that we don't get to feel the way we felt. And this would be an example, a part of me that is trying to make this presentation as good as possible so that I don't feel criticized and shamed by you guys. And then we have another big category of protectors, which we call the firefighters, because they are trying to numb or distract from the pain when the pain is already there. Sort of like, oh, the fire is coming and they have to extinguish the fire. So an example would be if I already feel shame, someone, says, oh, this is the worst presentation and goes out, I feel the shame and I'm like, okay, I have internet connection issues and I log out. So I cannot feel this shame and I have to live. I have to live. This type of feeling. Firefighter activity is when usually with addiction, soothing behaviors of other kinds. So managers trying to prevent and control the environment. Firefighters, when the pain comes up, they try to soothe or distract or numb. Okay. And we have another big category of parts, which we call the exiles. The exiles are the ones being protected, are vulnerable parts, the ones that hold the pain, that took on this event in their bodies. And they're kind of protected, like almost like smothered from the managers and the firefighters. And whenever we encounter reminders of that pain, they will be activated. This is what we would call a trigger, like a triggering event. And you feel something in your stomach or the breathing becomes very rapid. This is an exile coming to the surface. And of course, we try to immediately protectors will come in and try to stop this. Sometimes they can, sometimes they cannot. And the exiles also hold some of the most valuable qualities, actually, because when you have to suppress a certain young part, for example, Chris, his playfulness got him into trouble, right? So if he has to suppress the pain of the shame, at the same time, he has to suppress the playfulness. And then develops like this. All of us, in order to prevent some vulnerable emotion from coming to the surface, we end up suppressing also childlike qualities. So keep that in mind. It's not the parts that have a problem, they carry something, but they also are all valuable. And another important note, it's like our parts that re-experience the pain, they cannot know that we are in the present. So they're sort of like frozen in the past. There is no language to describe, there is no sense of time when you relive a traumatic event. So you're back there, example some of you may have heard is with the veterans. They come back from the war, they have what we call a flashback, and they're back in the war zone. They don't know they're in their living room. This happens also with parts of us that haven't experienced such traumas from many different types of attachment injuries and so on. Anyway, okay. Okay, so I have a task for you. Um, Unless you have any questions about the theory so far, if you have a hard time understanding what the task is, just let me know. You can just unmute and tell me. But if you don't, I want you to write down in your journal the parts of yourself that you can identify that have this manager role. So, to repeat, the managers will be the ones that are trying to control something, to prevent something bad from happening. It could be perfectionistic parts, criticizing parts, criticizing you or criticizing others. A sort of hypervigilance, constantly checking the environment to see what's dangerous or not. It could be parts that what we call passive pessimism are like, oh, you don't have to do this, you're going to fail, so don't even try. so that they avoid disappointment. Could be parts that try to analyze and think their way out of emotions, predict, schedule everything, achieve, overachieve, work hard, work even harder. So whatever you feel that, oh, I think I have a part like this, yeah, you just write it down. I will give you a few moments. You can think of other parts of yourself and just write them down. We're going to need them when we do the experiential. And if you have any questions, I'm here. I see here in the chat, dissociate. This would be more like a firefighter. So something is already arising and I have to dissociate. I'm out of my body now so that I don't feel. So kind of numbing. This is not a manager. Pleaser, perfectionism, analyze, scanning. I have all. Good, good. That's a lot of awareness, you know? Okay. I guess you've had enough time to write them down and we move on. Okay, this is a very important one. Unblending. The process through which we take some distance from a part. You don't have to name it a part even. Some of you may have experience with mindfulness, meditation. So what you do, you become the observer, taking distance from an emotion, taking distance from thoughts, from feelings. So this is unblending. Instead of I am angry now, I sense an angry part. I take some distance from it and I can see it, I can interact with it. I'm not just this part. So, for example, if have you seen, someone being very angry at in the road, right? And even want to go down with aggression, going out of the car. This person is very blended with an angry part, so he doesn't have any distance from it. He's just this part, and this part is controlling his body. Whereas when you start to notice something, you can take a step back and see. So this is unblending. It's very important because you can use it in your daily life. For example, just before this presentation, there was a part that was like, oh, what, very worried. Is anybody going to show up? How is the presentation going to go? And I could feel my heartbeat and I was becoming this part. And then you can sense like, oh, it's a part. I can see it and I can be with it. I'm not trying to push it away, but I can be with it. And that's soothing for the part. To be like an adult presence. So this is unblending. And yeah, do not confuse this with detaching or suppressing an emotion. It's not the same. We just take a step back and see. Good. Okay, I will talk more about the first two during the guidance, but as I said, remember you can unblend from parts of you in your daily life. It's not about therapy. It's not just about therapy. So whenever you notice, a certain set of emotion, certain set of thoughts, an inner voice that might also be hurtful or extreme or rigid, see if you can take just a step back, maybe a breath, and ask this part, to just give you some space, separate from you, so that you can see it, you can be with it. Very different from saying, oh, I don't want this, I have to push it away. Okay. And I have a question for you that is not to be answered maybe right now, but more like for your curiosity. I talked about our inner systems. I talked about them, how we have many different parts. So the question is, what is there when we unblend from a part, when we take some distance from it, or when it steps back? And maybe during the experiential, you will have such an experience. This is a key concept to IFS, and I can say that it has no words. You cannot say to a blind person, you cannot describe them color blue, right? How would you describe that? So this is just a curiosity for you to sense during your experience here and during your daily life. What happens when I unblend from a part? What is it that arises? Okay, so as I said, the process is we find the part and then we use unblending to be able to be with this part. I will give you an example. Let's say I want to work with my inner critic. So I focus on my inner critic. I feel this part in my body. I feel the sensation. I feel the inner critic's voice and so on. And then I realize I'm really angry with this part of me. So this would be another part, an angry part that I have to unblend from in order to be with the inner critic. Because as I said, it's a system and those little parts, they have their own interaction. So if I go angry, let's say I go angry to you, Paula, I come angry at you. Would you be more or less willing to communicate with me, right? You would get hostile too. Whereas if I asked my angry part to step back, something maybe some curiosity would arise, some playfulness, and then you would be more open at least to communicate with me. So it's the same with our inner world. And you don't have to believe me. Hopefully, some of you will experience it. Um, how we can unblend from parts in order to help other parts. Okay? So let's get into the experiential. Unless you have any questions or comments. I will read the chat. How it looks like and feels like when we unblend and talk to them. So this is my question for you actually. So by the end, maybe you will have an answer of how it is like and feels like when we can unblend from a part and we can, something else may arise and we can actually get to know it. Okay, something about legacy burdens. This is a more of an more complex topic. It's not something that maybe we can discuss it towards the end if we have time. Okay, if I have a part that gives me pain, you mean physical pain, I think. It is difficult to have patience and make a connection with it. Okay, so this I will reflect back to you on in parts language. So I have a part that gives me pain. And then I have another part that is not patient with this one that gives me pain. So what I have to do is ask from the impatient part to give me some space, take a step back, and then I will look at the pain with a fresh perspective. Maybe I can connect with it, get to know what it's trying to do. But if I go there with this impatience, like pain, pain, I want you to go away, at best nothing happens. At worst, pain gets more intense. But it's definitely something you can explore during we will get to know one part. So definitely something you can get to know. Okay, unblending. I feel fear plus I believe I am the fear. No, this would be I am blended. So I feel fear and I am in the fear. I don't see that there are other parts, that there is something else. This would be to be blended with the part. Whereas unblending would be I have a part of me that is fearful right now. I can sense it in my stomach. I'm really maybe open and compassionate towards it. So this would be I'm not blended with the part, but the part is still there and it's still fearful. But I am not the fear. I hope it's clear. What's the difference? Okay, if a person feels physically sick, would you say part of me feels sick? I really like this question. And no, uh, I wouldn't say that, but I can say that parts, and this has been shown from experience, can capitalize on physical symptoms. And there has been a study actually with rheumatoid arthritis. It's kind of inflammatory disease affecting multiple joints, sometimes causing a lot of pain. And they took the group of mostly women with arthritis, and there was an IFS group and a control group. And in the IFS group, they found that every single one of them had a very, very strong caretaking part. So they were trying to cater to other people's needs, but neglecting their own. And other parts would use that pain, would intensify that pain, so that the woman would stop and take care of herself. This is what they found. So they did IFS with them, and as soon as they got to know those parts, actually the symptoms got much better. So I'm not trying to say that I have knee pain, so a part of me is the knee pain. But I could interpret the knee pain through a part of me that is very worried about it, for example, and this would intensify the pain. So I hope this answers your question, but it could be a big conversation. Yes, Mike, I think you're this Mike. Physical pain, and I have two parts. The impatience, and the other one would not be the pain, would be the one that for some reason is trying to protect you through the pain. For some reason, intensifies the pain, for example. Of course, it could be a pain that is not related to parts. I'm not trying to imply that it's psychosomatic, but if it is, You have an impatient one that wants the pain to go away. You have some other parts that might want the pain to stay for some reason. Okay, good. I don't see any other questions. So we can spend some time actually getting to know a part. Um, so take your seat again. And first, I want you to choose one from the list of managers. And that's an important step. So I want you to choose a part that is just maybe trying to control the environment in some way or control, perfectionistic, the things we said in the list. And don't go for a part, that holds a lot of fear or that is involved with some extreme behavior. Okay, so just you can choose a manager, a part of you that you're kind of familiar with. Many of us, we can go first for the inner critic. Um, and just look at the list and choose with your intuition who may need more attention. And there's no right answer. And when you choose, I want you to really bring this part to the surface of your awareness. And you can bring in mind a memory when this part was really activated. And see if you can sense it in your body. Really bring this part to the surface. Now we're just going to get to know it a little bit. And notice if there are any thoughts, images that come together with this part. And even be vibration or color. What do you see and feel when this part comes on the surface? Of course, if you're not sure whether it's this part or just don't worry, stay with the body, no need to analyze. And as you look at this part that you've chosen, I ask you how you feel towards this part. And you don't have to answer to me, but ask yourself, how do I feel towards this part when I see it? As if you're looking at another person. And if you notice that you feel aggressive towards this part or you feel fearful, see if you can unblend from that. See if you can ask for some space. And look at the manager part you chose again with a fresh perspective. and see now how you feel towards this part. And again, if anything other than curiosity or even compassion arises, you can ask this part that's between you and the one we want to get to know to give you some space. And if you are curious, we will ask this part some questions. And I want you to wait from an answer that comes from the body. Don't try to think of an answer. So just ask, what is this part's job? What is it trying to do for you? And wait for an answer. What kind of situations activate this part? What does this part say or do to you or to other people? What is this part's good intention for you? And again, if you don't get any answers or if you find some hostility, you can see if there is another part between you and the one you're trying to communicate with. Can be very subtle sometimes, but one way to sense is that if you're really looking forward to the answer, then it's a part. Okay? So we really want to ask the question and allow the answer to come. We're not hunting for the answer. So keep your attention and your focus. Stay in the body. It's all fine if you don't get answers. And I ask, how long have you guys been together? You and this part in that job. And it might show you an image, might show you an age when it took on that role. What is this part afraid will happen if it relaxed, if it didn't do its job? And if you get an answer about the fear, you can ask follow-up question like, then what? Then what would happen? And you keep asking, and this part will show you how it's trying to protect you from something maybe that feels very intense for it. Does this part feel understood and appreciated by you? Does it trust you? And if the answer is no, you may ask why. What does this part do when it's not successful at doing its job? Any parts that work against this part? What does this part want from you moving forward? And how can you help it relax? Just ask and wait for an answer. And maybe you got some answers about how this part is trying to protect you from something. Or maybe you didn't, either way it's fine. So I ask again, how do you feel now towards this part? Maybe some appreciation or gratitude arises for how it has been trying to protect you. If that's the case and it feels genuine, you can communicate in your own way this appreciation to this part and notice how it responds. And whenever it feels complete, you can say your goodbyes for now. If you intend to get in touch with it again, you can promise that you will be there, you will not forget about it. And at your own pace, we can transition back to this space. And welcome to hear any reflection, sharing, difficulties you may have had or questions. Okay. Do I have to make contact with the parts every day? I think it's very difficult. I think that those are two separate uh, statements, right? So when we get to know a part, it's like getting to know a person, right? So we have to make consistent contact so we can build a trusting relationship. Because those parts can be operating on their own for decades, taking over the system and not knowing that there is another way. So yeah, being with your parts frequently can only do good. It can be very difficult and confusing, and I get it that you may not be able to sense what's going on or anything like that. And I encourage you to embrace this challenge and maybe even redo this meditation when you're more familiar with the model. Nicole, how am I going to pronounce it? Nikolai or Nicola?
Yes.
Okay. Hi.
Can I ask?
Of course.
Thank you. Um, I'm curious about this. Like, how do you know when to engage with a specific part? Like, I had the people pleaser come up, but
Mhm.
um, let's say I do this every day. How you know, like, today is the people pleaser, tomorrow is the perfectionism. Like, how I like to go about that.
Mhm. Okay, so your question, if I got it right, is different parts are activated in different days. So am I supposed to go to the same part every day or just to the one who is activated?
Yeah.
And that's a great question. And you can do it like in intervals, let's say. So let's say you go to the gym. If you do just um, one repetition of everything every day, probably you will get nothing out of it. Nothing will change. If you only do biceps every day, then you create a strong imbalance in the system, right? So we want to find this balance. When a part is very activated in a certain period of time, we want to stay with it and help it trust us. So we're sort of isolating our attention. But if other parts are activated, they may need some space too, and they will ask for it. You will see this model is self-correcting. So if I want to go to the pleaser part, but the critic says no, no, no all the time, then I have to pay attention to the critic. Got it? So you're going to learn this through experience. It's going to get more intuitive, but it needs practice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice shirt. Um, oh, okay. During the exercise, part of me got distracted and checking the phone. Okay, so this could be a distracting part, right? And what you could do was to focus your attention on this part. So whatever the guidance was, now you are talking to the distracting part. You say, okay, where I feel it in my body? Oh, I feel it in my hands. It's going to reach for the phone. Okay, good. I feel it there. I see it. And then if you ask maybe, why are you trying to distract me? What are you afraid will happen if I don't look at YouTube right now? And maybe you get an answer like, I don't want you to feel all this overwhelming thing. Maybe this part is trying to distract you from going inside. For some reason, it feels unsafe. So this is how I would go about it. Focus on the distracting part. Why is it trying to pick up the phone? And get to know it better. It's just a part of you. It's also needs your attention. Is it necessary to have a calm nervous system? Um, okay, that's a good question. But we need to define calm. For example, you may be regulated, but at the same time, you can be feeling intense sensations in your body because the parts show up in this way. So you need the baseline of calm, let's say, but this would be more like the unblending. So of course, if I'm totally dysregulated, I am totally blended with a part, most probably. And this where would come in maybe some nervous system regulation tools. You can work a bit with the body, with the breath, find some calm, and then you will see that it's much easier to relate to the parts. But you can find the calm through IFS. So you don't have to start with a calm nervous system. Usually we start with not without a calm nervous system. Okay, good. So I don't see more questions. We have just a few minutes. I will just talk a little bit about my approach, just a few words, and we can close after that. And one thing I want to name is that you guys, some of you got in touch with some parts, and this might create some different perspective in the next few days. So I really want you to be aware of that. Any weird, dreams, anything that might feel different is fine. That's a part of the system. This creates some sort of new stimulus, new signal. So it's normal if you experience something different in the next few days, nothing to worry about. Okay. So just, yeah, a few words. I would just ask you, but we don't have time. Why are you here? All I want to say that's very important to work with awareness in the body, to identify the parts that may be involved in the challenges you are currently facing, pay attention to them, and at the same time have in mind the bigger picture, like building awareness in the body. That's why I work with, except for the weekly session of IFS, I work with a daily practice, even 5 minutes, so that you can get to know the body. You can start to build concentration, focus. This makes our job very easier to get to know the parts, help them relax, and also integrate this in our daily life. And of course, movement, somatic techniques, nervous system regulation can all be helpful tools. Okay, so I really thank you for your presence. If you have more questions about this or about the method I use, you all have my email and you're very welcome to contact me. Let me see the chat again. What is the best way to start? Yeah, awareness of the body is a great way to start. So you identify the right entry point, right? And there are many different entry points that will get you there. So you just start, you don't have to worry about it so much. Through experience, we get more and more comfortable with working in this. Yes, the replay will be sent out. Yeah, and you guys, if you want, you can re-experience the meditations and do it with a different part and see how it's that different. Great. Great. So thank you all for being here, and we can stop the recording. And yeah, thank you for your presence, and I will be in touch with the recording soon. Okay.